Welcome to Hometown Heroes. This is Rick Irving and my co-host Mary Staffel, and today we have a real treat. About 2 years ago, Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Stacy, United States Army retired, and a Vietnam War veteran who is highly decorated, was on our about our 12th podcast, and we have him back for some more stories. And Bruce was in the Army, served in Vietnam, received 2 silver stars and 2 bronze stars and a couple of Purple Hearts along the way, and a whole list of other medals that he earned. So, Bruce, welcome to Hometown Heroes again.
Well, thanks for having me, Rick. I appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. And tell us a little bit about you. You grew up in Arkansas, so you're a Razorback boy.
Well, I went to Henderson State University, and they call themselves the Reddies. So that was my school, and my mom had gone there. So when I finished high school at 17, I started, and there was a mandatory 2-year LTC program, and of course, I enrolled in that, and I was actually making my best grades in that program, military science, and so it was quite interesting to get off to a start in college at 17. And then I was an 18-year-old sophomore. And between the sophomore and junior year, you have to make a decision whether you want to go under contract and enter the advanced program. And I elected to do that.
And so it was the Army ROTC, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And after you graduated from college, did you and join? You went into the Army. You didn't have to. Did you go to
Correct.
OCS or anything?
No, no. If you take Reserve Officers Training Corps, you don't have to go through any other commissioning source. You're
Okay.
commissioned at graduation, and then you can go to your officer basic course for your specific branch.
Okay. And your specific branch was infantry or
That
airborne
is
or
correct.
both?
Well, there are both. I graduated from college, and the next day I got up and drove to Fort Benning, Georgia. And in fact, I was so broke I had to sell my hunting rifle to get gas money to
Oh
get
my.
to Fort Benning. And so when I got to Fort Benning, of course, I got my TDY, and so I was in pretty good shape immediately. So I went through a couple of weeks, really about, I think, 8 weeks of the infantry officer basic course, which they had renamed the combat platoon leaders course, aptly, and then 3 weeks of jump school, and then I was qualified. And then I went to
And
Fort Hood initially.
and how long were you at Fort Hood?
Only 4 months.
Okay.
4 months because my orders for Vietnam were waiting on me when I arrived at Fort Hood, and so it was kind of a surprise that I didn't have to wait to know where I was going. I had orders to the 25th Infantry Division in Cu Chi, and and so I finished up from January to through April, and May I was on my way to Vietnam.
What year was that?
That was May of 1967.
Okay.
You were like 21 years old?
Well, I just turned 22 actually.
Wow. Yeah. So young. Oh my goodness.
Well,
And
I got some good experience at Fort Hood.
Yeah.
Um, I ran a platoon leader attack course, and I put I think all the platoons in that particular battalion through that course, and so after running about eight platoons through an attack course, I had a pretty good feel for it, and so I was critiquing them at the end of the attack, and also I ran an escape and evasion course and ran a rifle range. So it was a rather nice set of circumstances. I got some good exposure, and so when I arrived in Vietnam, I was clearly anticipating that I was going to be in action and very concerned about how well I would do. whether I would freeze up, whether I would panic, whether I would excel. Who knew? You really don't know.
Mhm.
And you were a second lieutenant, correct?
That is correct. I was the second lieutenant in Vietnam for a period of uh, 3 months through
Made
most of my action over there.
And so you arrived in Vietnam, and they assigned you a platoon, or
Yeah, what happened was I flew into Benoit. We got mortared. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. There was a mortar attack. In fact, some of the people that just got off the airplane were hit. Um, and we got processed, got our jungle fatigues, and I was lucky enough to catch a helicopter out to Cu Chi, and went through the process of getting assigned from the division to the brigade down to a battalion, and went through that process. And then there was a training school to acclimate you to Vietnam, and I got to have at least a few days of that before they said they needed me in the field.
well, just getting the mortar attack when you first arrived, that was kind of a indoctrination in itself, wasn't it?
Quite the
It
welcome,
was
wasn't
quite,
it?
yes. My feelings were, if it's going to be like this every day, I don't know if I'll make it. And so a lot of guys were shook up with that mortar attack because we just got off the plane. I was wearing khakis. I was carrying my Samsonite luggage I had used in college, and suddenly there were explosions. And I immediately said, they bracketed us. So, dove to the ground. And, after a while it was over. There were a barracks hit nearby, a lot of yelling going on, and finally got us into a bunker. And one of the soldiers said he was going to write his congressman. And his buddy said, well, what are you going to tell him? So you remember back when we went through advanced individual training, they told us the Viet Cong didn't have any airplanes. They just got through bombing the hell out of us. And so the soldier couldn't distinguish between being bombed and mortared. So everyone got a chuckle out of that to realize what was going on. And
I bet they did.
yeah, I didn't see a mortar attack for months after that.
So you went to where you're going to get assigned, and then how
Yep.
long was it before you went out in the field with your men?
It was about, I would say, a week and a half of getting processed and getting acclimated, and hearing all the BS stories from the people in the rear area. And because in a battalion of 800, there's probably about 400 of them in the field, and the rest of them are back in the base camp running operations back there. And so it was interesting to hear all the stories. But eventually, I got on a helicopter and I flew out, and I landed at the battalion tactical operations center, and I met the battalion commander, and he introduced himself, and he said, "Glad you're here," and that he wanted me to know that there were only 9 rifle platoons in his battalion of 800, and I was going to be lucky enough to get one of those rifle platoons. And I said, well, sir, I hope to live up to your expectations. And he said, I'm sure you will, because the most courageous guys in my battalion are the sergeant squad leaders and the lieutenant platoon leaders. And so I said, well, I'm ready. And so the company shows up, and I mount up with the lieutenant I'm going to replace on an armed personnel carrier, and we're on our way out to the field. And one of the soldiers I remember remarked to me, he said, Lieutenant Stacy, I don't know much about you, but I know you can't possibly be as good as Lieutenant McKnight, who's finishing up as platoon leader. I said, well, give me a chance. You might be surprised.
And so, whenever you go in the field, were you mechanized infantry? Did you have the
It was
APCs?
mechanized. I had 4 armored personnel carriers, yeah.
And how
And
many
there were
men?
3 platoons, 40, there were 40 soldiers,
Okay.
40 soldiers. And the first decision I had to make is, who did I want as my platoon sergeant? The company commander said, I've got 2 individuals that are capable of being your platoon sergeant, you get to choose. And this rarely happens, so I was quite lucky to get to make my own choice there. And there was an E7 Sergeant First Class who had been in the Korean War. He was from Puerto Rico. And then there was this other guy who was a staff sergeant, but he had been a master sergeant in World War II with the Rangers on D-Day. And he was in the Korean War. And now here he was in Vietnam. So 3 wars. So I told the company commander I'd take the guy with 3 wars.
A lot of experience there.
Yes, but I didn't ask myself the important question. Why was he an E6 staff sergeant after being a master sergeant as early as World War II?
He probably had some skeletons in his closet, you think?
There were, that came out later. He
Still
turned out to be an
probably
alcoholic.
the best person for the job.
He got me through about my first 4 months and gave me some good advice and also gave me some bad advice. At one point, he had me disobeying a direct order from a major and under his advice. So
Now
it
you
could have
know
got me
how he ended
relieved,
up as
kicked out of
staff
the.
sergeant, Rick.
Yep.
And so how
Eventually,
long
what happened? Yeah, go ahead.
How long after you went out in the did you come to your first combat?
Arrived in the field in late May, and I actually had my first combat in early June. So, but I saw some action because we were in a place called the Bulloy Woods, and what happened was that we were hit with RPG gunners. We took some fire, and of course the whole company returned fire, and of course the bad guys melted under all those 50 caliber machine gun returning fire. So I got some exposure, but my platoon got chose to be to go through the 25th Division Ambush Academy, and we were in fact the last platoon to go through it, and the only platoon to ever have action. Because at the end of the training, you take a live patrol out into enemy territory. And what happened to me was that my patrol got detected going out, and we got ambushed on our way to the ambush site.
Not what you wanted to happen.
No, not on my first action, and but I had a large patrol, 18-man patrol, and what happened was that we got hit as we were going through some tall grass, and we returned fire. Interestingly enough, I had a lane grader, Rick, on this operation, and he was a Korean War veteran, E7 Sergeant First Class. And so I felt very confident having this guy with me because I didn't have my platoon sergeant. The platoon sergeant was leading another patrol. So as I went to the ground, we first received fire. I was ready to turn over and ask this seasoned sergeant what we should do. And he had me by the legs and said, "Lieutenant, what are we going to do?" And as I went to the ground, so I shook him off of me and I said, "Up and return fire." So we formed an assault line, fired back into the bad guys, silenced them. I put them into a quick perimeter, and we threw some grenades back and forth. And I reported on the radio that we had been ambushed, we had countered the ambush, and requested a reaction force because it appeared we had movement on every side of our perimeter. And so what the commandant of the school said was, "We don't have a reaction force. Get yourself out," and which is not exactly what you always want to hear. But so I made a determination we were going to break out, throw grenades in all directions, break out in a direction perpendicular to the base camp, and then swing back into it. as I gave the men in the instructions, one of my soldiers stopped me and said, "Hey, Lieutenant, the base camp's over there. You got us going in a different direction." And my comment to him was, "Well, don't you think the enemy expects us to go that way? I'm going to do the unexpected." And he said, "Oh." So we broke out in a different direction in the base camp, and we easily broke out. And as we were breaking across the clearing, I heard a bolt slam home on a weapon, and my flanker said he knocked down a bad guy. I went over, and there was movement. So I fired into the movement with my shotgun. I had the only shotgun on the trip, and what happened was the patrol broke and ran on me, and that's not what you want to see happen as a new lieutenant. And so I immediately took off to catch the lead guy, and as it turns out, the lead guy was the lane grader, the sergeant first class. Of course, I took him to the ground with a butt stroke and dumped him. He was apologizing. "I'm sorry, sir." I said, "Shut up." I never spoke to the guy again as he hit the ground. And grabbed every one of my soldiers I bypassed to catch him and pulled them down to the ground. Now, this is a night patrol, so it's darker. It's dark with no moon. And as I got everybody organized, we caught movement behind us, and I took the M60 machine gunner. He hosed the area, and so we went back and we got back to the base camp perimeter. I gave the password, and then I checked every guy in. We brought everybody back that we went out with. So it was a successful patrol. We identified where the enemy was at, got some artillery fire in that area, and the only problem was one of my soldiers dropped the Starlight scope, which is a confidential item. And unfortunately, we came back without a classified item, which we went out and got the next day. And as it turns out, it was laying right there, and along with several magazines and even a grenade with a pin in it, as we kind of policed the area where we had the action. So that was my first combat.
Well, it sounds like probably some of the training you did at Fort Hood helped you in that first patrol. Do you think?
Yeah, I felt rather confident throughout the action, and I had the usual banner going with the troops, as and which they needed to hear from me as the leader. And so the patrol came back in good order. My platoon sergeant um, actually handed me my combat infantry badge and said, "Sir, you're going to need to start wearing this because you earned it tonight," which was a nice gesture. And as we checked everybody in, and of course, the next day we went out and recovered that Starlight scope and some assorted magazines and grenades that had dropped off the guy's gear.
I wonder what was going through your men's minds as they see you running past them, and they probably
I
thought,
was concerned
"We
about
need
that,
to
Rick.
follow him."
I was concerned about that. I
That
had this
was.
vision. I had this vision, and the vision was me walking in the officers' club and everybody walking out because I was the guy who lost control of the patrol, and I wasn't about to take that rap. That reputation was not going to be hung around my neck because I was not going to lose control, and so I ran like a gazelle to get up to the front of that runaway, and of course I thought about the fact they thought I may be outrunning them, headed to the rear, but
Mm,
as it turns out, we never spoke about that panic in the platoon,
just kind of kept
and
it
it
to
was
yourselves.
that's right, that was kept internal, and the commandant of the school was very impressed. He told me he was recommending me for a Bronze Star for Valor, and I said, "Well, I don't know if I deserve it or not, but I appreciate it." And interestingly enough, my company commander read it and said, "Lieutenant, that's exactly what we expect from our young officers. Nothing more, nothing less." And as it turns out, when the new company commander changed, the executive officer said, "Well, you deserve this," and he put it on through. So, because he knew the story about the panic, which was an additional component of the patrol.
But you came back with all your men. Nobody was injured,
Yes.
and nobody was killed.
I actually caught it one piece of shrapnel on my finger, of all things. But when that starlight scope went missing, my assistant patrol leader, who was a buck sergeant, crawled back to find it in the dark. And as he crawled back there, the bad guys threw a grenade on him. And I remember him jumping up and running towards me, and there's a flash behind him. And in that flash, I saw him go up in the air and do a somersault and land on his feet.
Oh
And come
my.
running back to me panting, and said, I couldn't find it, sir. And I said, forget about it. And I said, I'll take the rap. And of course, they like to hear that. And but he tried, and he got a lot of shrapnel on his backside. And so as they were taking that one piece of shrapnel out of me and putting it in a pan with a little ding, they were digging about 20 or 30 pieces out of him. And he undoubtedly set off magnetic controls at airports for the rest of his life, because he had extra shrapnel in him.
But he does.
Incidentally, whenever the company commander said I was just doing my job, I said, I'd like to make sure that my assistant patrol leader is recognized with a Bronze Star for Valor, and I got him the award. And also I got the guy who was on the flank that thought he had knocked down a Viet Cong. I got him an Army Commendation Medal with V device for Valor. So I got those two guys recognized. Of course, when it got back to my platoon that I had turned down my award and got two soldiers recognized, it went over real well.
Yeah. Yeah, that was worth its weight in gold for certain, with those enlisted
Yep.
folks knowing you had their back.
It made a lot of difference. And I think also they lacked the fact that no one talked about the shame of them panicking under duress.
Yeah. Well, after you came back, then you would go out on normal patrols every week or every day, or how was your life
Well,
over there?
what happened? Yeah, what happened next was there was a land clearing operation, clearing foliage around a engineer company's fire base up on the Saigon River. There was a road that ran directly up to directly north-south. So we got the mission of going up and securing the plows that were clearing the land back. So we stuck to the right side of the road going up. And we used it coming back down and then going back up. So the third day, this is only 8 days later from the patrol. The third day, we finished up the job and we got ready to go back. As I looked back, Rick, something struck me, and it was kind of like an epiphany, if you will, that I thought to myself, we've set a pattern for 3 days going down that particular west side of the road. I'm going to switch sides. And my squad leader on my Army personnel carrier said, sir, I know what you're thinking, but we know there's no landmines over there where we've been traveling. If we switch sides, we don't know what we're going to hit. And as I responded to him, I said, Sergeant, I'm not worried about landmines. And, and I didn't say anything else. And I put them down the other side of the road. Well, my hunch was right, because there were 4 rocket-propelled grenade gunners perfectly spaced for my 4 armored personnel carriers. If we had stayed on that side of the road we'd been traveling, they would have engaged us at about 10 feet. They couldn't miss. But because I switched sides of the road, they all missed. They were long shots. One was so close it knocked the gas can off that was strapped to the back of the platoon sergeant's armored personnel carrier. So that one came really close. So what I'd rehearsed the guys to do was turn into the ambush and engage with the 50 caliber machine guns and suppress them. And once we suppressed them, we were going to move on them. And they executed exactly what I'd rehearsed them. So everybody stopped, swung left. All four armored personnel carriers opened up, and one jammed. The 50 caliber on my machine gun on my platoon sergeant's armored personnel carrier jammed. They pulled up an M60 machine gun from within the compartment, laid it across the barrel, and used that. But we moved rather quickly onto the ambush, and we pretty much overran the ambush in quick order. And of course, that was a daylight ambush. And as we got up on top of the ambush site,
that's really where your training with your team pays off, right? Because that's that muscle memory of this is how we do it. Yes. And so they don't have to think about it. They don't have to, oh, wait, what do I have to do now? So that's where that memory of that repeatedly, people wonder why in the military, why do you do these things over and over again? Well, because when it hits the fan, it's got to be instinctive. You have to know this is what we do. Boom, let's go. Right?
Yeah, I was very unpopular when I arrived and told them I was canceling their day off so we could do battle drills, rehearsals. And they commented to me, well, sir, we know this stuff. We don't really need to go out and run through it. And I said, well, you may well. I said, but you don't know me and I don't know you. And have you ever heard of a new quarterback taking over a team and going on the field without rehearsing? Everybody looked at each other and shook their head no. I said, okay, I'm the new captain of the team here, and we're going to rehearse. And they grabbed and groused. But you know something? There was no grousing after that battle drill worked so well and no one got killed. And but the most important thing I did was decide to take an alternate route on the return to the base camp from that mission. Because if I'd stuck to where my sergeant had recommended, it would have been a disaster. We'd all got hit simultaneously, and the platoon could have got wiped out. Mm. But as it worked out, it worked perfectly. And as we got up on the objective, the ground collapsed underneath my armored personnel carrier, and I realized these guys are underground. They're in spotter holes. So I told every armored personnel carrier to spin 360, and so we spun, crunched the ground down more on top of them, and then we continued. We pretty much, if they were in there, they were crunched, and we collapsed the tunnels, and then we moved forward, still engaging, to the point we were getting cook-offs on the 50 calibers. In other words, without firing the weapon, the heat of the chamber were causing the rounds to go off, which was dangerous. And the guns were overheated. And that's the reason you fire in burst. My squad leader never let off. He just kept gunning it. And as we finished the attack, I turned to my platoon sergeant, and the next thing I know, the guy right beside me took a round and bounced off of me. The guy did, not the round. And he took a hit. I called for the medic. The medic does a acrobatic twirl and jumps off the ground from the platoon sergeant's armored personnel carrier, and then does a spin up in the air and lands inside mine. So it was very cool the way he pulled that off. But the guy bled all over me, and but the medic got the bleeding stopped, and I got on the radio, told the battalion operations.
And whenever you go out in the field, would you go out for days at a time or just a few days?
Somebody out there to you, stay in place. And I said, how long is that going to take? He said, 2 hours. And I looked at my platoon sergeant. My platoon sergeant shook his head. And I knew that we suppressed the enemy fire, 50 caliber machine guns blazing. We went in. One of the 50 calibers jammed. The headspace and timing was off, but so they had to pull an M60 machine gun out of the interior of the armored personnel carrier, lay it over the barrel. But as we went in, we did overrun the enemy position, and we did crush some tunnels because the ground was collapsing underneath those heavy armored personnel carriers. So we accomplished the execution, and I reported back to the battalion operations center that we had encountered an ambush, and we had countered the ambush, and the direction was to stay in place. And so at that point, my platoon sergeant said, "You got to get us out of here, sir." So we shot our way out, and I disobeyed a direct order to stay in contact. And my platoon sergeant's urging for us to get out of that kill zone. And when I got back to the base camp, which was a couple of hours, not a couple of hours, only a couple of miles away, I did get chewed out, and I knew I had it coming. But at the end of my being chewed out, I told the battalion operations officer, who was a major, "I was the only officer on the ground, sir. It was my decision to make, and I made it." And that pretty much let the air out of his tires. He got flustered then because he didn't have any response to what I just told him. And my roommate, who was another platoon leader, shows up with his platoon. My platoon sergeant comes running over to me with his hand wrapped up because there was shrapnel thrown into his hand when the RPG took the gas can off the back of his armored personnel carrier. And he said, "Sir, I've been in 3 wars. You're the first lieutenant to get me wounded." And I look at him and say, "Well, Sergeant, you're way overdue. At this point, you should have been wounded several times." And he laughed, and I laughed, and the whole platoon laughed. And my remark to him that he should have been wounded several times. And I told him to go ahead and go to the aid station, and we'd carry on without it. And he said, "No, sir, I'm not leaving you." And so he didn't go get it treated. He stayed with me, and we mounted back up and went in with the other platoon and finished the job. All in a day's work, Rick.
Your men, they started having a lot more respect for you too, didn't they?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing the evolution of that I was, the biggest asshole known to man whenever I canceled their day off, to the point where we counterattacked through that ambush. Suddenly they were coming up to see me and asking me to come down and have a drink with them at the enlisted club. And as Mary will tell you, that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. That's for sure.
Troops want to get away from it. And yeah. So I initially turned him down, saying I don't fraternize with the troops. But my roommate, who had gone to OCS, he'd been an enlisted man for several years, elbowed me and said, "You got to go." He said, "I'd give anything if my men would ask me to have a drink with them." And so I went down. I held court with the guys in my platoon. We had a great discussion. I thanked them for their courage in that fight, and they thanked me for taking them through the fight. So they liked that. Soldiers yearn for discipline.
Yeah.
Soldiers yearn for someone who can deliver. That's not just an officer in name only, and they recognize that my tactical skills was exactly what they needed, and I was thankful that I grew up in the woods in Arkansas and I could handle the tactical situation pretty much with ease, because I paid attention in class when we talked about small unit tactics and land navigation, and all those skills came into play.
All that training, that self-training in the woods helped you later, didn't it?
It really did. Growing up hunting and fishing outdoors, understanding how to use terrain to your advantage. And I was also on the university rifle team for several years when I was in college. So my marksmanship skills were good, but for the most part, I was controlling my men's fire. I wasn't firing my weapon. Actually, in that attack, I was firing over the head of my driver, and he turned and gave me a dirty look because I was shooting about 6 inches over his head. And so I ceased fire when I got the dirty look from him. So,
he's
my
probably
job
getting.
was to control the.
Yeah, he's probably got
Yeah, I
disability
got his attention.
percentage for hearing.
And we heard somebody a couple of weeks ago that was an officer, and they said exactly the same thing. About you don't need a gun, or a weapon. You need to lead your men. So
that's right. You need to pay attention to your surroundings, and when you're looking through the sights on a weapon, you're restricting your vision to a very small area, and you need to constantly be surveying what's going on, looking for movement to the right or left, and to understand where the bad guys are firing from. So if you're busy shooting, you're not doing your job.
that's right. When did you get your the Silver Star, your first Silver Star?
That event, that counterattacking, that Viet Cong ambush I just described was my first Silver Star medal. I was still a second lieutenant, and I was put in by my men for the Silver Star.
And it's very uncommon for an officer in the infantry to earn 2 Silver Stars or be awarded 2 Silver Stars.
Well, it's so uncommon. There's only one serving officer in the entire United States Army right now that has 2 Silver Stars. Is that uncommon?
And so you were in Vietnam for one tour, and you received Bronze Star, Silver Star, and then you came back. You came back, and you were awarded another Silver Star in your second tour. Correct?
Second tour. That's correct. I went back as a captain. Well, when I came back from Vietnam, I went to the 82nd Airborne Division, and they gave me a major's position. I just made captain. And they said, we need you to take over as battalion operations officer. And I said, well, I haven't even been to the officer's advanced course yet. And it was felt a little strange, but I took over a paratroop battalion operations and training position, S3, and ran it. And I was a very junior captain. I was a 23-year-old captain. Now, when I went back to Vietnam, I went back to command a company in the very same area where I arrived in my first year. And I took over a company of 2 mechanized platoons, 1 tank platoon, and a South Vietnamese paratroop company. So I had a small task force in reality. And I got wounded in the first good fight, actually. And I was recognized for rescuing one of my soldiers and pulling him out of the fight, and in the process, get myself wounded.
And you hadn't been there very long at that time, have you?
No, I'd only been there a little over a week, I think. So I just arrived and was, it came pretty quickly. I was planning on relieving both of the lieutenants because they didn't follow my orders. I had instructed them to engage the wood line where we saw a trail watcher run into. I knew the bad guys were in there, and I said, engage at will. And these guys never fired. So the enemy got off the first volley, and actually wounded 3 people, killed 1, wounded 2 of our guys. And both those lieutenants, if I had not been wounded, but it would have been relieved. Failure to follow orders.
And so you actually, was it an American or Vietnamese that got killed that was with you?
It was a tank driver.
Okay.
Tank driver got killed, and he got hit in the head, which put him away.
Were they firing RPGs too?
Yeah, they were both RPGs and AK-47s, full automatic. So it was a pretty intense fire for a period of time. And what made me really angry was my guys were not returning fire, which my platoon would have been tearing them up, and these guys were hugging the ground. So I was upset. You can imagine I was cursing and on the radio telling them to engage, damn it. And as it worked out, they were pretty fortunate that I was wounded in medevac because their careers would have been over.
Because after you were wounded, you left Vietnam then?
I got medevac to Japan and then on to Fort Sam Houston.
Okay. Yeah, and how long did it take you to recover?
So probably about 4 months, Rick, to get recovered. And I went to Fort Benning and became a test and evaluation officer with the infantry school, testing how to increase hit probability of all things.
So after you left Vietnam and recovered, then you continued your career for another 20 years or so, or how long were you in?
Almost. I was in slightly over 20. And yes, I went to Fort Benning. I went to the advanced course, but I had a few months where I had a really interesting job, increasing hit probability. And I came to the realization that most of the fights we were in Vietnam, there were no visible targets. So how do you engage a target you can't see? So I did some pretty deep research. And in fact, I received an Army Commendation Medal for just for the research I did there in a couple of months about how to engage targets that are not visible by sound only. And I ran several experiments with soldiers that were fresh out of training. And I discovered most of them didn't know what the hell to do if they couldn't see the target.
That's pretty important because especially at night you hear the sound, but you have a fear that might be friendly people.
You don't know, Rick.
Because you don't want to. You don't want to.
You get where you. Yeah, you don't practice. You don't be guilty of fratricide, shooting your own folks. And but let me tell you, at night you get the muzzle flash. Except the M79 or the M203 grenade launchers have no signature. No signature at night. So there's an advantage to using them at night. Because, in fact, the best shot I ever did in Vietnam was at the bunker line. I was officer of the day, and it was middle of the night, and I was going out checking the soldiers on the perimeter of the base camp. On a still night, a flare went off. I'll reach over and pick up M79 grenade launcher, bring it to my shoulder, estimate how much I needed to tilt it up, popped it, and it knocked the flare out at about 150 yards out.
Wow.
And immediately the soldiers gasped that I was able in one shot to knock a flare out. But I got a lot of practice with that. I would often do that as we entered wood lines. I'd put a couple in there. And so that was probably one of my best shots.
Wow.
So, as you continued your military career after you left Vietnam, it brought you to Fort Worth. after a lot of traveling in different places of the world.
Yes, it did. I was coming back from 3 years in Germany with NATO over there at Wiesbaden, and I was assigned to be the commander of the TC Army ROTC program. And I had made lieutenant colonel in Europe, and so I think I had about 18 or 19 years in at that point. And so I was able to put my thumbprint on a lot of young cadets at TCU and get them oriented in the right direction. So the program was pretty much recognized as the best in the nation as we developed it. Also, I took 9 airborne qualified cadets back to Germany on spring break, and we parachuted with the West German Army and skied Berchtesgaden, and so it was quite a trip.
That was a good trip for ROTC people.
Yeah.
Oh,
you got your jump wing. You have your jump wings with several other countries too, don't you? Besides just the Germans.
I have the Canadian jump wings. I got those in Edmonton, Alberta. Before I went to Germany, I was with the 82nd Airborne and 18th Airborne Corps, and I had the opportunity to go to Canadian Jump School at Edmonton. And so I went up for a week and made 5 jumps on frozen ground with those guys.
One thing I admire about you, Bruce, is even though you aren't part of the ROTC program now, being employed there, you still have contact with the ROTC program, and you do a lot to give those ROTC candidates different experiences because, on our Fort Hood trips, you've taken them there, you take them to other events so they can get that exposure, which a lot of college people don't get, especially in the ROTC program.
That's very true.
And you have some ROTC cadets that went on to have time in service, and now they're back in Fort Worth doing some good work. So,
yeah, amazingly, some of them wound up outranking me. I was one of them made Major General, and several made Colonel. So
that's good.
It was, yep. I felt really good about producing some good leaders for the Army. And of course, with a lot of the things that you and I are doing with the Fort Worth Air Power Council, we have an opportunity to incorporate them in where they get some exposure. And in fact, we've got something coming up on May the 8th called Vietnam War Stories, right?
That's right. And it was in April of 1975 that Saigon fell, correct? We had a little technical difficulty with Bruce. He was using his phone, but he was talking about May 8th. We've kind of got a joint Vietnam War stories with Fort Worth Air Power Council and with the Fort Worth Air Power Council, with Roll Call, with Freedom Mobility Foundation and Air Power Foundation. And we are going to have a very good time. We'll have about 4 Vietnam veterans. Some were on the ground, some were in the air. Hopefully we'll be able to get one who was in the air that got shot down and was in the Hanoi Hilton for a while. We'll have more information in the next few weeks about that. Don Graves' birthday is coming up on May the 3rd. Tell us about that, Mary.
So May the 3rd, and I'll go out and put the flyer on our Facebook page. Hopefully I'll get that done today. And of course, we're going to get it out and publicize it as much as we can. But from 12 to 3 on May 3rd, Don's actual 100th birthday, we are going to honor him. And it's a come and go thing. So it's at the Hearsay in Arlington. And they will be providing non-alcoholic beverages and appetizers if anybody wants anything more, then there will, of course, be a cash bar and the ability to purchase anything else that they might want. But, there's no expectation of gifts, just people come there, see him, thank him for his service, congratulate him on his 100th birthday. There will be an opportunity to take pictures with him. So, whatever folks want to do, but we just want to get a lot of people out. It's a very public party. So share it with everybody that when you get it, when you see the flyer on Facebook, wherever you might have your social media, share it and let folks know that it is open to the public. Anybody can come join us. They will have valet parking available. There is a Rangers game that night. So the only thing that I'm still not sure of is whether or not for just regular parking, if they will be charging it at that time before the game. So I'm still trying to get an answer on that. But really, it's just an opportunity for the community to come out and thank Don and share a special moment with him on his 100th birthday. And it should be a fun time for all.
But not only is he, World War II Iwo Jima survivor, United States Marine veteran, but he's a guy that has given back and given back and given back his whole life. He was in the ministry, and then after he got here, he's gone and talked to thousands and tens and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and sang "God Bless America." That's kind of his trademark song. So.
And he does a national anthem too, a lot of places. So, he sang at the Rangers games and all kinds of other
rodeo.
The day after his birthday, he'll be singing for the third time at the NASCAR race at the Texas Motor Stadium. So, it's just a neat time to share with somebody. He was 82. You brought up that he served in ministry. He served in ministry until he was 82. That's when he retired. So just think of all the years. I think he said 29 years or something like that in ministry. What an incredible life. And, he deserves to be honored for that service. And, for the longest time, and still even today, Don goes out to speak to organizations and groups, civic groups, whatever the case might be. And they will do a donation to roll call in lieu of a speaker fee. So he doesn't charge a set speaker fee. He just asks that the organization, based on their ability, does a donation to roll call so that we can continue our mission of honoring and serving veterans by providing them the lunch and all the other things that we do for them. So, we want to make sure that we're honoring him because of all that he's done for roll call. And it is a joint thing. So Air Power Council's been involved. Air Power Foundation's been involved. Jeff Owings, who owns Owings Auto in Grand Prairie, he is a sponsor for the event. So obviously we want folks to go out there and visit. If you want a good used car and somebody that's not going to be a used car salesman, but is actually going to take great care of you, you want to go out and see Jeff and his group at Owings Auto. But he is a huge supporter of roll call and of Don. He just loves Don. I think he met him. Didn't he meet him like at a gas station or truck stop or something? And the whole thing just took off from there.
Yeah, he's been a great supporter of roll call.
Yeah.
And let me just put the Fort Worth Air Power Council. We talked about that earlier. Here's their website. It's fwapc.org. And you can find out more at the Fort Worth Air Power Council about some of the things that are going on, about our mission to help the families and the military at NASJRB. And we do I think we do a very good job at keeping our finger on the pulse of all the different organizations out there, because we have a few Army people, but we have a lot of Navy people, Air Force people, and of course Marines out there. So I don't know if we have a Coast Guard out there, but there may be a Coast Guard.
Yeah, I don't think any Coast Guard, but the Army is their footprint is getting a little larger out there. So that's a neat thing to see.
It is. And roll call is coming up. Here's roll-call.org. The reservation line is open, so you can go to the rollcall.org. There's been an email sent out saying it's reservation time, and go on there quickly because in another 24 hours, there's not going to be many reservations left.
Right.
And who's going to be the speaker this? Well, we aren't have a speaker this month.
Right. We're not going to have a speaker because we're doing a Vietnam veteran pinning, our last ceremony. This is the 50th year, and since Vietnam. So we are following through with that commemoration that's supposed to end after this year. So this will be our last major pinning ceremony. And right now, I think we're somewhere around 70 Vietnam veterans who have not ever been pinned who will be pinned that day. So if you're a Vietnam veteran and you have not gotten your pin, then this is an opportunity to do it. But you'd have to reach out to us in advance. You can't sign up that day. If you're not on the list when you get to the luncheon, you're not going to get on that list.
And that's Vietnam veterans and Vietnam era veterans.
Right. Anyone who served, I can't remember the dates, but it's a very long period of time. And, because not the Vietnam era veterans, those that didn't serve in combat, they still did their part and they still received some of that same harsh treatment. So just because they weren't in theater doesn't mean that their treatment was any better. Because, I think you guys have all heard me tell my story. I went in 1978 and we were still then told, be careful where you wear your uniform. People won't appreciate it. And, all the after effects of Vietnam, even several years later. So it was something that they had to carry with them as well. So if they're a Vietnam era veteran, don't have to be a combat, didn't have to be in country. And if you haven't gotten pinned, we need to hear from you soon because we would need to get you on that list. And you'd need to get an RSVP in the system. But it should be a really great ceremony. And then in April, our speaker will be Tom Starr, who we've had on the show. And so it really works out because he was hoping to be able to speak March or April again to coincide with the Vietnam, all of the, Vietnam Veteran Day and everything else that goes on at this time of the year concerning the Vietnam veterans. So we've got some real good stuff coming up.
And do we have a location yet on the April meeting?
So right now I'm saying we will be on base. I just still have not heard back from the POC to get confirmation that we have an easier process. The reality is that the process is going to be a little bit different. So folks are going to have to get some more information turned in and we'll work all that out. But April 25th on base, and they will have some static displays out. The food is always very, very good. We will open up a higher number of RSVPs for that because we do get more people along with the active duty that are serving out there on base will be joining us. So it will be a very, very full lunch, but well worth it. Well worth it.
It is indeed. Anything else coming up that we know of?
Oh, gosh. Heavens.
Medal of Honor Museum is going to have their grand opening next month.
Yep.
And then the Fort Worth or the Air Power Foundation in May is going to have a special event where you can actually meet 5 or 6 of the Medal of Honor recipients. And it'll be a nice event. And we'll put some information up about that as well.
Yeah.
So,
and there's, so I was trying to find the dates for the, oh gosh, now I can't find them. There are, I think 3 or 4 days right there. And we put them in our newsletter. If I could find our newsletter, I could tell you. But there will be 3 or 4 days that if you are a veteran, and I'm sure that if you've got family members that you typically take with you places, I can't imagine that that's a problem to take them with you, but you can bring them with you to the event, and it is free those first couple of days that they're open for veterans to come out and tour the museum. So really you want to do that. And I'm looking, but I can't, not finding the email. I'm sure that I can share it online again, and we can share it via all of our social media just to make sure everybody knows those dates. But if if you're not a Cornerstone member, if you don't have anything else and, any other way to go for free and you can't afford to go, then this is a great opportunity, right? Go out and view the, there it is, the newsletter. Let me find it. And then, of course, we have the Vietnam veteran car rally. So there's a car rally on the 29th. In addition to on the 29th, the commissary there will be a ceremony on base for those Vietnam veterans that still need to get pinned. Let's see, March 25th through 28th, all veterans in active duty can tour the National Medal of Honor Museum. So it's another great opportunity to get out there and tour that.
And Mary and I have both been able to go out during the construction of the museum and just see the awesomeness of it, because it's not just a little bitty museum with a couple of rooms. It's going to be a magnificent place that they have to honor our Medal of Honor recipients.
For sure. Yep. And then you've got the Silver Dollar Classic Car Club. They have a car show, Vietnam Veterans Day car show, Eagle Mountain Marina. And that is Saturday, the 29th, starts at 9:00. So another opportunity to go out and get involved in the community, do something there that you might be interested in. And then what else do we have? We have Hops and Props on April 26th. We can talk more about that in the weeks to come. So there's lots of stuff going on.
A lot of things in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So,
yep, no need for anybody to sit at home being bored, and not most of this stuff costs you absolutely nothing. So we really strive to make sure that anything that we are putting out there is stuff that our veterans can go enjoy for free, because we do know that a lot of our veterans aren't in a position to just, they don't have disposable income to just go do fun things. Sometimes all they're doing is trying to keep a roof over their head and the bills paid.
And one thing about roll call, and I've heard over and over, is that veterans didn't ever tell their story until they came to roll call and started hearing the other veterans tell their story. And then they started sharing their story with their families, with others on podcasts like this, and then as speakers at roll call too. So, just a few weeks ago we had Bill Pugh on, and he said that exactly that he just never talked about it. But he started going to roll call, and roll call just gets in your blood, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Hard to walk away from.
And it's kind of a family deal too, because we've had those veterans that whose some family members would come with them, and then those veterans passed away, and their family members still come and still be part of the fellowship. And then we have people that are non-veterans that are just great supporters. We have a good core of those people who love to honor our veterans, and they are the worker bees that come out there and work behind the scenes to make roll call a meaningful place where veterans can come and have that camaraderie and be honored. So,
for sure, I think we always say we have the best volunteers in the world, because they're there every month. They get there early, they stay late, and they just wrap their arms around the veterans and just love on them and serve them. Because, for folks that haven't been to a luncheon, there's not lines. Like, people aren't getting up and getting in line to get their food. There are volunteers that put plates in front of them. They fill their drinks. It is just a really neat experience for folks that haven't been in. And it doesn't cost anybody a penny to join. Doesn't matter if you're a veteran or not. It's free to join. And the only thing that we ask is the non-veterans contribute the $15 cost of the meal. That's it. That's all we ask. And if they can't, if they say, hey, I want to be there, but I absolutely can't do that, then, then so be it. But we raise money to feed the veterans as a free veteran luncheon. So we do ask that those that can do contribute that $15.
And on our website, roll-call.org, there is a place that you can make a donation, and you can have a donation taken monthly.
Mm-hmm. We just started a new campaign to sponsor a veteran. So Debbie will be rolling that out, our new director of fundraising. She's going to roll that out to where folks can say, I want to sponsor one veteran a month, or I want to sponsor 2, or however many they want. And
we could make it where it's different tier levels. I mean, if you want to sponsor a veteran like me to have steak and lobster, we do that. Or if you want to sponsor a veteran that just wants a hamburger or a bologna sandwich, we've got different levels.
Oh, geez, Rick.
but do check us out, whether you're a veteran or just interested in seeing about the veteran community and what Roll Call has done for our veterans, because it's not just a luncheon, but it's just a 365-day deal that we're actively involved in the lives of our veterans. We take them places, we have things for them to do, and we just are there to support them. So,
yeah,
it's a great organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had a good show. Had a very highly decorated Vietnam veteran, Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Stacy, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, and a whole host of other awards that he earned. And I'll have those listed in the description for the podcast. So we just thank you all for being part of this podcast, and we'll see you next week with another good episode of Hometown Heroes.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above, from the mountains to the prairie, to the ocean. Why we're born. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, our home sweet home.